Hi, this is Keith Williams. Welcome to 5 Watt World. We're interested in helping you get the most music from the least gear. Leo Fender did not invent the electric bass guitar, any more than he invented the solid body electric guitar with the Telecaster. But he did create the first commercially viable instruments, setting the bar for all that come after. This is never more true than the Precision, or P-bass. I'm going to take us through the history of the P-bass from its roots to its current day, and touch on some of the players that have figured large in that story. Take a minute to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when we put out new videos. If you've already subscribed, swing by the store, grab a t-shirt or a mug to support what we're doing here. There's a link in the description. The P-bass came out in October of 1951, though it wasn't officially launched until the Summer NAMM show in 1952. The P-bass was a dramatic step forward in electric bass design. Before the P-bass, there were a small number of other upright-style electric basses. Perhaps the best known was Rickenbacker's electric bass viol, a solid stick that went directly into the top of its amplifier. In 1936, Paul Tutmarc, a maker of lap steel guitars in Seattle, introduced a solid-body, fretted electric bass guitar designed to be played in a horizontal position. Tutmarc tried again in 1947, but neither design took off. It's debated whether Leo Fender was aware of Tutmarc's bass, but there is no question that the P-bass has very little in common with anything that came before. Along with Leo's famous statement about wanting to free the bass player from the big doghouse in the back of the band, he also had in mind guitarists looking to get more work by doubling on bass. Leo was famous for working with local musicians in and around Fullerton, California, to help shape his ideas into instruments. From this research, Leo learned that dance bands were getting smaller in the late 1940s, and guitarists believed they were missing out on work. Learning the upright bass, with its high action and lack of frets, seemed daunting, so Leo began musing about creating a fretted bass that would be held like a guitar. The first P-bass had much in common with its smaller cousin, the Telecaster. It featured the same slab-sided ash body with a bolt-on maple neck. The prototype had tuning machines which were sourced from an upright bass, and it had gut strings wrapped in steel. But the production instruments sported Kluson tuners, and Fender had ordered flat-wound strings from the V.C. Squier Company. The ash body was finished in the same pale yellow as the Broadcasters, later named Telecasters, of the same year. The body had two cutaways, the first Fender design of that kind, that gave the large body better balance. The upper horn extended up to the 12th fret, so the guitar would hang evenly on a strap. The cutaways also reduced the overall weight. The shape ultimately gave Fender ideas that would make it into the Stratocaster guitar. Another shared aesthetic from the early Telecasters was a black plastic pickguard. The original pickup was a simple single coil, much like the Telecaster pickups, with a pull piece under each string, and it had two knurled knobs controlling volume and tone. Leo's original goal was to recreate the sound of an upright bass. He thought if it was going to be accepted, then it would need to properly substitute for that role in the band. So the Fender included a mute in the bridge cover to create a more dead and short note, and the bridge used two pressed carbon saddles that didn't yield a large amount of sustain. The large cover over the bridge and pickup were there to help with shielding. Also like a Tele, the strings passed through the body and over the bridge. The thumb rest was set below the strings because Leo assumed that players would rest their fingers there and pluck the strings with their thumb. By all accounts, it sounded like the loudest upright bass you ever heard. The 20-fret neck was chunky like early Telecaster necks and had a Tele-style headstock to hold the tuners and a round string retainer for the D and G strings. The specifics of deciding on the scale length of the bass is still debated. According to Richard Smith, perhaps the authority on Leo Fender, and author of Fender, The Sound Heard Round the World, Leo used information he found in a physics textbook that belonged to a secretary at Fender named Elizabeth Hazlett, who was a student at UCLA, to come up with the 34-inch scale. George Fullerton, Leo's early business partner, said it was more a matter of trial and error. We tried some shorter scales like 30 and 32 inches, but they didn't seem to get the resonance we needed. The 34-inch scale also falls halfway between the 25.5-inch of Fender's Telecaster and the 40-inch scale of most upright basses. Irrespective of how they figured it out, 34 inches has since become the scale of choice for the majority of bass guitars. One of Fender's marketing choices as part of their plan to entice guitar players was that it would be tuned E, A, D, G, one octave below standard tuning of the four lowest strings on a guitar. Also, according to Smith, Leo chose the name Precision bass because the frets made the intonation more precise than that of an upright bass. But the name also referred to the precise or focused tone of the instrument, and the way the basses were being manufactured at Fender's factory, being made on machines, being more precise than the hand tools of traditional luthiers. All of this can be seen in the patent for ornamental design submitted by Leo for the P-bass in November of 1952, which was later granted in March of 1953. Once all the details have been worked out, the first P-basses went on sale for $199.50. Leo knew that the Rickenbacker electric upright had been sold with a purpose-built amplifier, and he knew that his guitar amplifiers were not up to the job of reproducing the lower frequencies. So he set to work designing what would be the first Fender Bassman. The ad stated, "especially designed for bass reproduction." It had a 15-inch speaker and produced about 26 watts, enough power to create what we would now think of as low to medium volume. While this wattage seems tiny compared to modern bass amps, in the 50s this was a big step forward, and the amplifier was often sold with the bass. The Leo had hopes of seeing his P-bass adopted by a country artist in Southern California, and there is an account of Joel Price playing an early P-bass at the Grand Ole Opry in 1952. The overall reception of Leo's bass guitar, much like the response to the first broadcaster, was altogether lackluster. The first big break came from a very unlikely place: jazz. Leo was traveling the country promoting his instruments and stopped at a nightclub performance of vibraphonist Lionel Hampton's band in New York. There he had a chance to meet Hampton and his bass player at the time, Roy Johnson. Though the reception of the bass from the crowd at the club was not favorable, Hampton himself really liked the sound, and Leo told him he could keep the bass. In an issue of Downbeat magazine from July of 1952, Leonard Feather reported, "Suddenly, we observed that there was something wrong with the band. It didn't have a bass player, and yet we heard bass." Feather went on to praise the sound of the P-bass as having a deep, booming quality. The bass, its volume turned up a little above normal, cut through the whole bottom of the band like a surging undertow. Dusty Hill of ZZ Top is probably the best-known player of the 51 to 54 Blackguard P-basses, using them to this present day. By 1951, big band's popularity was starting to wane, and small groups were on the rise. Jump blues, which later led directly to rock and roll, was a fertile ground for a full-sounding low end. Still, the P-bass was more of a novelty than a fixture by the mid-50s, so Leo continued to tweak his bass to try to reach more players. The first significant changes came in 1954. First, they changed to a two-tone sunburst finish. According to George Fullerton, Fender did not consider the tonal differences between ash and alder to be a big factor, and so they didn't begin using alder for the sunburst bodies until 1956, due to a difference in cost. The top and back contours of the body that were designed into the Stratocaster were added to the P-bass as well. The 54 and 55 basses might have either a black or a white pickguard, but by 1956 only the white guards were being used. The pickup's pole pieces were changed to more closely follow the radius of the fingerboard. And also in 1954, the pressed fiber saddles were replaced with steel. The location of the serial number was somewhat fluid between 54 and 56, sometimes appearing on the neck plate and other times on the bridge plate. Of these early basses, one of the most famous belongs to Sting, who used his favorite 54 P-bass until it was eventually replaced for roadwork by a Fender Custom Shop replica. By the mid-50s, Fender had hired Forrest White and Freddie Tavares to help oversee production and design. These staffing changes at Fender allowed Leo to do what he liked best, subtly improve his designs. And this brought about the next and most lasting changes to the P-bass. In 1957, the new split-coil pickup design was implemented. They were hum-canceling, making the bass quieter. The two magnets per string design lowered magnetic string pull and improved the tone and output of the pickup. The headstock was changed to mimic the shape of the Stratocaster as well. Some believe that the additional mass increased sustain and helped eliminate dead spots on the neck. The bridge was modified to have 4 individually adjustable saddles to provide more adjustment for string height and intonation. The bridge was changed to a top-loader design, where the strings no longer passed through the body, and it was attached to the body with 5 screws instead of the previous 3. A new one-piece pickguard in gold anodized in aluminum was designed to encompass the pickups and hold all the electronics, volume, tone, and input jack. The control knobs were switched from rounded to flat top. There was a cutout in the pickguard, and the pickup was mounted directly to the body. The covers for the pickup and bridge were redesigned to fit with the rest of the changes. Like the other guitars in the Fender line, the neck started to have a soft V shape. Finally, the thumb rest, previously wood and mounted with 1 screw, was changed to plastic and attached with 2 screws. 1957 also saw the marketing of custom DuPont Duco finishes for an upcharge. Custom colored P-basses listed for $230, while the standard Sunburst finish listed for $219.50. Elvis Presley's bassist Bill Black settled into using a P-bass and famously introduced the sound to millions on the 1957 hit Jailhouse Rock. Many consider this the first major hit featuring the sound of an electric bass guitar. As dance bands continued to become smaller, the sound of the electric bass was a driver in making that revolution possible. According to Quincy Jones, who was dividing his time between big band, jazz, and pop arranging at the time, quote, "It really changed the sound of the music because it ate up so much space. Before the electric bass and the electric guitar, the rhythm section was the support section, backing up the horns and the piano. But when they were introduced, everything upstairs had to take a back seat. The rhythm section became the stars, all because of this technological development." In 1958, Chicago bluesman Dave Myers began using a P-bass, and after blowing up 2 guitar amps, he finally got a basement amp and started using it at gigs. Myers reported that the audience response was immediate. They would be standing up on chairs and going wild. That's when I knew I really had something going with that Fender bass. After the major overhaul in '57, the changes in the next couple of years were more subtle. 1958 saw the introduction of the 3-tone sunburst, and 1959 featured the new rosewood fingerboards, discontinuing the solid maple neck by 1960. And they replaced the gold anodized guard with a plastic tortoiseshell style with metal shielding on the back, and the pickguard went from having 10 screws to 13. The late 1950s saw an America that was still profoundly racially divided in its listening habits. Jailhouse Rock might have been in the introduction, but it was likely the surf music of the early 60s that cemented the sound of the electric bass, and hence the P-bass, in the minds of the young white audience, not yet hip to electric blues coming out of Chicago. Though other electric basses were around by then, it was seen as a sign of having made it to have a P-bass in the lineup. The trend continued as the British invasion, influenced by both Chicago blues and surf music, started accelerating. The success of these bands, first in the UK and then in the States, demanded more volume than was possible with an upright bass. The electric bass gave bass players a larger role, using different patterns that became integral to the music. This would not only impact how the music was being performed, but also, eventually, how the music was being written. It isn't an exaggeration to say that P-basses dominated from the mid-50s to the mid-70s. There were so few changes in the P-bass during the 60s that the pictures used in the Fender catalog weren't even updated every year. Whether it was Motown, Sax Bolt, Chicago Blues, or New York City, the P-bass was everywhere on records and in performances. The early 60s also saw the rise of studio musicians using the P-bass. In 1963, session guitarist Carol Kay played a P-bass on a session when the scheduled bass player failed to show. Within a year, she was the #1 studio bass player in Los Angeles, playing on hits including the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations and Simon & Garfunkel's Homeward Bound. Her standard rig was a P-bass strung with medium-gauge strings, which she played with a pick. Of course, the bassist that casts the longest shadow of all is James Jamerson, often simply referred to as St. James. He played on dozens of Motown hits using his 1962 P-bass known as the Funk Machine. It was completely stock, with the pickup cover and foam string mute still in place. It was strung with labella flat wounds, used by so many. The action was quite high, likely because Jamerson had started out on upright. Sadly, the bass was stolen near the end of his life and has never been recovered. Another studio giant, Chuck Rainey, credited Jamerson as his main influence. He was a first-call session player from the mid-60s onward, playing his 57 P-bass on literally hundreds of sessions, including Marvin Gaye, Sam Cooke, and Aretha Franklin. His work on Steely Dan's classic Asia stands the test of time and is the record Rainey cites as his own personal favorite. Stax Volt's session great, Donald Duck Dunn, was one of the great ambassadors for the P-bass. He got his first P-bass when he was just 16 years old, and throughout his life he always referred to the Sunburst with a one-piece maple neck as a 58. But after his death, his son had some work done on the bass, and the neck was marked April of 59. He later played a 59 P-bass that was almost identical, except that it had been fitted with a rosewood fretboard neck. He too used heavy labella flat-wound strings like his hero Jamerson. In 1998, Fender produced a signature instrument based on a late 50s style P, with a maple neck and gold anodized pickguard in his favorite candy apple red finish. There were, of course, subtle changes that followed along with others in Fender history. The logos changed from the original spaghetti logo to the blockier logo with patent numbers added in 1964. This is now known as the transition logo because it was used right before the sale of Fender to CBS in '65. Later that year, the large F appeared stamped on the neck plate that denotes the CBS years. And in 1966, there's an interesting curve in P-bass history when a special bass was produced for the UK market. After an import ban on American instruments in the UK ended in 1959, the floodgates opened and players in Britain embraced the newly available Fender guitars and basses. The 66 UK Precisions echoed the first P-bass style. They had a slab body and a black pickguard. This model is notable because John Entwistle of The Who played one in the earliest days of the band. Entwistle was also known to later play basses he put together with a Gibson Thunderbird body and a P-bass neck that he liked to refer to as Fender birds. In '66, production manager Forrest White also approved a new tuner that could be manufactured in-house at Fender. Generally referred to as paddle tuners, they were used until 1970. And now, if you'll allow for a slight digression, this is probably a good time to outline the history of a close cousin of the P-bass. In 1968, the original Precision bass design was reissued in the US as the Telecaster bass. Like the 66 UK basses, it echoed many of the original appointments of the 51 P-bass, with a strings-through slab body and two-saddle bridge. The pickguard was white rather than black, but the shape was like the originals. And the headstock controls were the same as well. Most of the necks were constructed with a separate maple fingerboard, but some were built with one-piece maple necks. There was a good reproduction of the original single-coil 50s pickup, too. The logos were changing across this period, and this helps date the specific year of the basses, which were made for 4 years, from 1966 to 1972. In 1994, Fender Japan built a reissue 51 P-bass, which was really a copy of the 68 to 72 Telecaster basses. These are still being built and have been joined by Mike Dirnt and Sting's signature models as well. But back to the traditional P-bass history. During the 60s, Fender began by using a single-ply nitrocellulose material for the pickguard. However, as it deteriorated, it gave off gases and it broke down, leading to corrosion of the metal parts. Fender switched to a single-ply white plastic pickguard that were cut unbeveled to replicate the original one-ply look. In 1970, Fender offered the first fretless version of the P-bass. Despite the incredible impact of Jaco Pastorius later in the 70s, Fender didn't offer a fretless jazz bass until many years later. Black Sabbath bassist Geezer Butler famously wielded a P-bass in the 70s, playing a pair of pre-CBS Precisions. And Francis Rocco Prestia played P-basses in the funk band Tower Power, primarily known for playing his customized purple transparent American Deluxe, with a split P-bass pickup that was reversed for a punchier tone. When Fender began doing natural finishes in the 70s, they moved back to using ash as the primary bodywood. The 70s also saw the beginning of 3- and 4-ply pickguards on the P-bass. Though custom colors were offered and might be popular among collectors today, players were still generally gravitating towards sunburst, black, and white instruments. Late in 1976, the serial number moved to the headstock, and the numbering generally denotes the year of manufacture. Founded in 1975, Iron Maiden's only constant member, Steve Harris, has been the foundation of the band, rocking his Precisions. His original P-bass, which he has played on every album, has gone through a number of refins over the years, from white to black to blue sparkle, and now white with the crest of the West Ham United Football Club. My vintage expert Dave Honorato would want me to include the details on original cases for P-basses over time, so let me do that all in one place. From 1951 to 59, they were tweed, and then, like Fender amps, were switched to brown Tolex until late in 1962, and then white from 63 to early 64, and then black Tolex until 1978 when they changed to molded plastic, and that runs until the present. In 1980, Fender released the Precision Special with gold and brass hardware. Brass hardware was much in vogue in the late 70s and early 80s as it was thought to increase sustain. In 1982, Bill Schultz was running Fender, and along with factory upgrades, they began doing vintage reissues in earnest. They issued both 57 and 62 P-bass replicas, authentic right down to the period-correct pickguards and location of the thumb rest, and their case colors. In addition to these reissues, they issued the first active P-bass with the 1982 version of the Precision Special and the Precision Bass Special Walnut models, the latter of which had a beautiful matching walnut body and neck. Though the standard series basses retained their traditional passive circuitry, they did get the white pickup covers that had been added to the Precision Specials that year. In 1983, Fender issued the Elite Series P-bass, which included new bridges, electronics, pickups, tuners, and a biflex truss rod. In 1985, CBS sold Fender to an investor group headed by Bill Schultz, and manufacturing was moved from Fullerton to Corona, California. According to employees at the time, most of the vintage reissue basses sold in 85 and 86 were put together from parts manufactured in 84 and 85 and had been in the warehouse. Schultz's new team produced the biggest change yet, with the Precision Bass Plus in 1989. The 20-fret neck was replaced with a 22-fret version, which required stretching the top horn of the body to correct the balance. They used lace sensor pickups with a selector switch for series or parallel for the neck pickup, and added a jazz bass pickup near the bridge, the first of the now common P-Jace pickup configurations, to give the player the sound of both the precision and a jazz bass in one instrument. The subsequent year's NAMM show saw the release of dramatically redesigned basses from Fender. Fender was looking towards the metal audience, with downsized bodies and headstocks, as well as removing the pickguards entirely. By '94, grunge had nearly replaced metal in aesthetics, and Fender returned to its more vintage sensibilities. John Suhr was in the custom shop at the time, and he oversaw the development of new pickups and active circuits for the new Deluxe series. There were also new body, neck, and bridge designs. The necks were reinforced with graphite rods. Strings went back through the body. They added thicker peg heads for greater sustain, and a more accessible truss rod were all part of these changes. At the same time, American standards benefited from the graphite reinforced necks, but retained the 20-fret neck and a traditional body shape, with a 9.5 radius fingerboard and medium jumbo frets. Passive electronics, they returned to the string through the body as well. In many ways, they harken back to the features you'd find on a late 50s or early 60s P-Bass. In 1997, maple fretboards were offered again, along with a deluxe fretless model. In '98, the Deluxe series included new noiseless pickups from Bill Turner, and they began to use a new lightweight tuning gear to improve balance. The Deluxe sported abalone dots to provide an upgraded look to the fretboard. Though studio and touring legend Lee Sklar has been associated with many brands over the years, his favorite studio instrument is a modified P-Bass. It has an additional P-Bass pickup near the bridge, a 62 precision neck that was reshaped to a jazz bass dimensions, and then it was fitted with narrow mandolin fret wire for more precise intonation. And most recently, Pino Palladino has brought P-Basses back into the limelight. Likely, his biggest impact on the P-Bass world has come from his touring with the John Mayer Trio from 2005 to the present. Based on his favorite 61 and 63 P-Basses, there is a custom shop Palladino signature P-Bass in faded Fiesta Red finish, with a tortoiseshell pickguard, just like the one he used with Mayer. From '99 to the present, we've seen an almost endless string of variations on a theme of the past. Different names, combinations of woods, fingerboard materials, colors, pickguards, tuners, bridges, and electronics coming from the custom shop, Fender US, Fender Japan, and the Squier line. And all are still immediately recognizable as P-Bass, in looks and tone. Along with being the first commercially viable bass guitar, the Precision is by far the most recorded electric bass in history, with only the Fender Jazz Bass coming close. But that's the subject of another video. 3 books in particular made this video possible. How the Fender Bass Changed the World by Jim Roberts. The Fender Bass, An Illustrated History by J.W. Black and Albert Molinaro. And The Bass Book by Tony Bacon and Barry Morehouse. The books are linked in the description below. I'd like to thank bassist and composer Neil Elliott from Seville, Spain for writing and performing the P-Bass music for the video. See the link in the description to find more of his exceptional bass-centric writing. I'd also like to thank Dave Honorato of Dojo Guitar Repair in Atlanta, my vintage expert, for his always insightful help with the script. If you enjoyed the video, throw us a like, and don't forget to subscribe, and check out the store for a t-shirt or mug to support what we're doing here. Thanks for watching. Until next time, thanks for being a part of the 5 Watt world.